Hello and welcome. Data science plays a very critical role in understanding how consumers behave and will behave, and therefore what are the products or services that you should be rolling out in order to meet those needs or aspirations as the case may be. This is of course becoming a more and more technologically complex science, and only few people or few corporations are becoming better at it. And what is the role that India can play in this journey and is playing already, and particularly for large corporations like Target? Joining me to talk about that is Paritosh Desai, Chief Data Analytics Officer at Target Corporation. Paritosh, thank you very much for speaking with us. So let me ask you a broader question first. So what are the key trends that you're seeing in the data science space, and something that you've spent a lot of time on, including in previous organizations, and how is that playing out in the way large corporations or retail corporations are engaging with their customers?
Thank you, Govind. Thank you for this invitation. Glad to be here. So let me answer that question in a couple of different ways. The first question we need to answer is, why is data science or AI becoming so much important or critical at this juncture? And there the answer is that there are three factors that are coming together. There is more digitization, which means more data. There is a lot of cheaper compute, which means we can do things that we barely imagined we could do even 10 years ago. And the third one are some of the breakthroughs that we have seen, especially in the AI space, whether that is with complex neural networks, reinforcement learning, and other approaches, which is then driving a lot of different use cases. Which brings me to the second part is, once you have this raw ingredients, how and what can you do to help improve your business? And if you're a retailer, you almost always break it down into really three basic components. One is, how do you help the guests? Second one is, how do you help us run our internal operations better? And the last one is, how can we improve the broader retail experiences themselves? And so in each of these areas, data science is starting to play a really important role. If you look at product development, you can use AI and data science to speed up how to do new product development. If you're looking at operations, for example, Target has almost 2,000 stores in the US and a large workforce of more than 300,000 employees. Scheduling them using more of AI techniques is a better way to solve that problem. And if you come to our website, and then you have a lot of different experiences, recommendations of product content, all driven through AI. So the short answer is, there are many different ways in which AI can help businesses, not just Target and retail, but more broadly beyond retail.
Right. So let me pick on an example and maybe try and build on that. So you launched Everspring, which is a green brand. You've got almost 70 products under Everspring, and that's the most recent launch in your portfolio. Now, what is the role that data science would have played in bringing out this product at this time, in the manner that it has, and in the variations of the product categories that you've launched?
So instead of speaking just for Everspring as a brand, let me talk about our general approach, because you don't always need data science.
Sure.
It's small data is still good data, and sometimes you need big data, large data. So the first and foremost thing that we do is provide a good sense of what is the market fit for the products that we want to launch, or the brand. And so our organization makes sure that we provide the right kind of data and metrics to help steer that. Then we come to predictive metrics, which is much more about forecasting sales in the first month, in the first quarter, in the first year, which is where some of these sophistication starts coming in, because it's not like we are selling Evergreen or any other brand for the first time. We have sold those kinds of products. But trying to automate what products to match and how to make adjustments for how marketplace has changed, that is where data science plays a role.
And can you give me an example or an illustration from the past, maybe, where data science has helped you either fine-tune or change or tinker with a certain product, and that has had a certain impact on sales?
So I would talk about our personalization engine, which is much more about personalizing experiences on Target's website, which has certainly resulted into increased engagement, increased conversion, and fairly large incremental revenues. I'm not sure if we have publicly shared the information, but it has become an integral part and important for planning for our growth. And the way that it works is that as consumers, as you're trying to look for products, it makes it easier for you to find what you're looking for, but not just finding what you're looking for now, but what are the associated products. So if you bought a top, can you find a bottom much quicker? And this is something that we see, and in fact, I'm a user of that experience myself, certainly with Target, where it's a lot easier once you get to one part. For example, buying Cat and Jack brand clothes for my kids, you find and buy t-shirts, and it's very easy for you to navigate and find other t-shirts, other shorts, other pants.
Right, so data is becoming more precious and has a market of its own as opposed to the other transactions that you're doing with your customers. So tell us about that. I mean, how is this value getting created and where is it going?
So our approach to extracting value out of data is really twofold, as I mentioned, is to help improve our internal operations. So if we can plan better for our stores and stores labor, which is where we spend billions of dollars, even 10 basis point improvement will translate into large cost savings. But more importantly, it may also lead to better employee sentiment because we are able to recognize people's constraints when they want to work, when they don't want to work. The other area is really...
Can you illustrate that?
Yes, absolutely. So a couple of examples. It's not everybody wants to work on the same days of the week. Of course, everybody likes to take weekends off, but if you don't want to take weekends off, what are your preferred days that you want to take off? And if this was the only problem, that would be easy. Now you have to mash up that problem with our planned category transitions, holidays, and other events that are happening. And so what you need to do is match up your workforce bandwidth with what you need to do within the stores and on the floor. And so if you can do that match better while recognizing constraints that either people have or the business has, that is what leads to better outcomes and improvements.
So would you say that the internal and the external are almost balanced in terms of how you're using data science for value and revenue?
In some ways, it is hard to draw these boundaries because why do we want to improve store operations? It's not just the cost part, it's actually to steer our store associates to help our guests, and so it translates into better guest engagement and revenues. So these things sometimes become harder, but really it's fair to say that the amount of energy that we spend for improving guest engagement, experience, and outcomes versus internal is likely going to be 50-50, maybe a little bit more tilted for the guests because that is what we want to serve. And just to be clear, we call our customers, consumers, guests.
Yes. Right. So a lot of this work goes on in India. So tell us about what's been happening over the many years, decades that you've been here in India, and how is that integrating more and more into the mothership as it were? And your mothership is not technically your mothership because you sit in the valley as opposed to...
Absolutely. So the way that I like to believe is that all modern organizations will have global offices, and the challenge is how do you structure work so that way you can take advantage of your talent in all locations. And so Target, of course, has been in India for more than 10 years, certainly a pioneer. And what we have done in the last few years is to really double down on what we call the product model. So it's a combination of agile methodology and thinking about solving problems using product management kind of approach. But when you think through that lens, you start thinking about what are the critical skills you need in order to develop a product. And so those skills may be located in multiple locations. So we might have teams where you really have a global set of team members coming together. In some cases, what we decide is that the product owner, the business, and the developers, they're all located in the same location, and they're able to deliver that work. But when we are doing it, the concern is not about we should do it in location X or location Y. It's almost always driven by where can we get this done, where do we have the bandwidth, where do we have the people. So just in the data science case, in fact, we started some of the work with our personalization engine based out of team members in India. And they were not the only people. They integrated with people in Silicon Valley, in Minneapolis. So we do come together. I'm not saying that we don't have challenges or global teams don't have challenges, but if the approach is we want to develop products and services and we want to index on talent and capabilities, taking an integrated approach becomes a lot easier.
Right, and when you work with data scientists world over, how do you, if you do that, allocate roles? I mean, for example, data scientists from India have a certain kind of competency which maybe data scientists in Europe or Eastern Europe may not?
So our approach so far has been we want to find people with high-end capabilities and let them be where they want to be, which is why we have 3 locations. And so it is fair to say that it's not a pure capability play that we have capability A in one location and B in another location. What we have is maybe the mix of those capabilities, and the experience does vary. And so it becomes a problem of matching up products or problems we are solving with the skills and capabilities in the location. So we have examples where the entire capability of our product is developed out of Bangalore, India. We have examples where it is developed from 2 locations, and also examples where it is being developed out of more than 3 locations. And we continue to look at whether the teams are able to function most effectively and efficiently or not. So which is a question of, do we move work, do we move products based upon what is it that we want to achieve? And we have learned some very basic principles. If you require to talk to your business partners on a daily basis, then that becomes a bit harder to do in a remote fashion, versus things where if that interaction is not that frequent, then it becomes easier. So you have to apply common sense lens, but we have a very large workforce in Bangalore, and we continue to grow and invest. So there is no doubt in my mind that the global model actually works.
Right, and I mean, in some ways you've answered this question already, but so as you look back and say, okay, we have now 10 years into so many people and therefore so many man years of understanding, knowledge, capability, skills on retail and the technology that drives retail, where can it go, and what's the horizon looking like?
So that is a very exciting question, and many different places that it can go. As a technologist, what I would say is that there are a set of new technologies just coming up on the horizon, either ready or will become ready. As an example, quantum computing, and that will allow us to do a lot more data science or computations. But there are many more mundane things that are out there too. But if you start imagining if compute bandwidth and algorithms are not a constraint, you could see AI showing up in almost all places, which is starting to happen. And the question is, where does Target want to see that? What makes sense? So clearly we are not going to be going into unrelated businesses. Our strategy is always to look at our guest and what we stand for, and then continue to innovate on that front. But to name a few, vision, natural language processing, conversations, these are some of the newer skills that are helping us innovate in many different ways. But let's not forget, we are trying to completely transform our supply chain, which is also benefiting from some of these newer developments, whether we call it machine learning or AI.
Right, and you know, I saw you speak about algorithms, and then how you need more than math and engineering to fix problems or even understand problems and define them. So tell us about that journey. I mean, I don't know, it sounds like a conceptual frustration for someone like you.
Yes, absolutely. And it's less of a frustration and more of a learning. Right? So the example that I give is, let's suppose you have a medical condition and you have a choice of going to a live doctor versus going to a machine. That's what will it take you to go to a machine? Right? Because when we think about ourselves as analytics or AI professionals, that's what we are doing. We are creating a machine. And what we forget is that machine is only as good as the data that you feed in. And we don't take account for the fact that we don't have sufficient information to begin with. And so my personal perspective for next 10 years is that man and machine are actually going to work together to solve problems better. So that is one. The second one that I want to bring up is that just because you know AI doesn't mean you can solve a domain problem. It's you absolutely need to develop an understanding of what the domain is. Talk to the practitioners of the domain. They have a lot of experience, right? Human mind in some ways is the best AI machine. So throwing away that experience and expertise doesn't make sense. So my experience is, unless you understand the domain and your problem, talking about AI just does not make sense.
And finally, what's the one thing that you are presently working on which is keeping you excited and staying up?
So my problems are tied with whatever Target's strategic priorities are. Supply chain is one of the problems that we have been working for a few years and will continue to work on for many years, because we certainly want to transform it and we want to continue to innovate, because we think that's the next frontier, which will help us drive for not just differentiation, but just bring a lot more value to our guests.
That's a good note to end on. Paritosh, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you, Govind.
Thank you.